Good afternoon, everyone, and we'll be beginning today's budget hearings. It's going to be concerning MSDE, Aid to Education, and we'll begin with an analysis from Ms. Laura Hyde.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. This is the Aid to Education analysis for the Maryland State Department of Education. So starting on page 1 with the operating budget summary, the fiscal 2026 budget for Aid to Education increases by $590 million or 5.8% to $10.7 billion. Turning to page 6, Exhibit 1 shows the English Language Arts MCAP scores for the past 3 school years, which indicate that although ELA scores have improved since spring 2022, with the exception of grade 10, all grade levels continue to have a majority of students scoring at a beginning or developing level of achievement. A similar pattern can be seen for math scores on page 8 in Exhibit 2, with all grade levels continuing again to have a majority of students scoring at a beginning or a developing level of achievement. Exhibit 3 on page 9 provides a comparison of MCAP scores in ELA and mathematics for grades 3 through 8, which shows that more students scored proficient or distinguished in ELA than mathematics at each grade level. The bold language on page 10 asks MSDE to comment on assessment performance, recommendations of the assessment task force, and the rationale for new assessments. At the bottom of page 10, under the heading Closeout, the bold language asks MSDE to comment on continued high encumbrances each year. Exhibits 4 through 9 on pages 12 through 19 discuss the fiscal 2026 budget as introduced, changes from the fiscal 2025 budget, allocations for major state aid, enrollment, and provisions introduced in the BRFA. The bold language on page 21 is a DLS recommendation to shift 100% of the fiscal 2026 increase in the state share of teacher retirement costs to local jurisdictions. Moving to the issue section on page 22 is the start of issue 1, which discusses the governor's fiscal 2026 budget plan as introduced in Senate Bill 429 and House Bill 504. Exhibit 10 shows the proposed changes to the target per pupil foundation amount for collaborative time, which results in an approximately $1.8 billion decrease across 6 programs from fiscal 26 to 30, contingent on the passage of this legislation. Because the SEED school was not included in these proposed changes, DLS recommends aligning SEED funding with the governor's proposed budget plan. Turning to page 23, Exhibit 11 shows that the proposed changes in this budget plan to the concentration of poverty program would result in an approximate decrease of $664 million from fiscal 27 to 30 due to a pause in the proportion of the per pupil grant amount received by eligible schools. Turning to page 24, Exhibit 12 shows that the budget plan proposes 8 new programs eligible for Blueprint funds that receive $75.9 million in the fiscal 26 budget. The bold language on page 25 notes that 2 programs, the Grow Your Own Educators program and the Academic Excellence Fund, appear duplicative to other LEA and professional development programs and recommends reductions to those allowances. The bold language also asks MSDE to comment on the projected costs and number of personnel needed for administration of new Blueprint programs proposed in this legislation. On pages 26 through 28, Exhibits 13 and 14 show the distribution of Blueprint funds by agency and program. On page 29, Exhibit 15 provides the Blueprint revenue outlook, which indicates that with changes contingent on the passage of this budget plan and the BRFA, Blueprint program costs are covered through fiscal 2027 with $1.1 billion in general funds needed starting in fiscal 28. Turning to page 31, issue 2, this is non-public placements. Exhibit 16 shows expenditures for this program, which exceeded the allowance in fiscal 2024 and 2025. The fiscal 26 allowance in the budget is introduced, totals $172.8 million, of which $25 million is contingent on the enactment of a BRFA provision to phase in a change to the state local cost share over 2 years. If that proposal is passed, the allowance for the program in fiscal 26 would total $147.1 million. The bold language asks MSDE to comment on prior year overspending. Turning to page 33, Issue 3, Autism Waiver. Exhibit 17 shows autism waiver enrollment and costs for implementation of the End-to-Wait Acts of 2022 and 2023, which were intended to move approximately 1,500 individuals off the autism waiver waitlist. The program received $30 million in the dedicated purpose account in fiscal 2023, which continues to be expended. In fiscal 26, the allowance of $58.7 million supports 2,065 slots, which is 885 slots less than MSD's target enrollment of 2,950 individuals for this year. The bold language on page 32 asks MSDE to comment on current expenditures and discuss the number of slots the allowance will be able to support in fiscal 2026. On the bottom of page 33 is issue 4 on talking about enrollment and program counts. In a 2024 JCR report on free and reduced price meal student counts for the compensatory education program, MSDE reported that an audit of these data revealed an undercount for Dorchester County's enrollment by 43 students, which should result in an extra $205,000 in additional funding in fiscal 2025. MSDE also reported that Baltimore City continues to submit a district level instead of a school level community eligibility percentage, which potentially impacts their CPG funding. The bold language on page 35 asks MSDE to comment on these and other concerns regarding FRPM enrollment. In the same issue, on page 36, Exhibit 18 examines differences between the new expanded college and career readiness standard and the interim standard, which may impact funding for the program. The bold language on the top of page 37 asks MSDE to comment on the expanded CCR standard, what steps MSDE and LEAs are taking to ensure that all Maryland students are college and career ready by the end of grade 12. The last part of this issue starts on page 38 in Exhibit 19, which shows the distribution of National Board Certified Teachers by LEA. In fiscal 2025, 97% of NBC teachers taught in a non-low performing school and 3% taught in a low performing school. Additionally, 16 LEAs reported no NBC teacher in a low performing school. The bold language on page 39 asks MSD to comment on these concerns. On pages 40 and 41 is issue 5, LEA federal stimulus funding. Exhibits 20 and 21 show funding for both ESSER and relief grants by LEA. The bold language on page 41 asks MSD to provide updated information on ESSER funding through the end of calendar 2024, including a breakout by expenditure type. The recommended actions for the Aid to Education analysis start on page 43, and the remaining pages include appendices and detailed changes for all programs from fiscal 2025 to 2026. This concludes my presentation, and I am happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Hyde, for a wonderful presentation. Do you have questions, Delegate Grice?
Yeah, just a question. It has to do with the teacher pensions, and I understand that you guys are charged with, offering options, and it's up to us to determine whether or not we want to take those options or not as far as potential cuts, even though that wouldn't be a cut. It's just shifting the cost because we're still spending the money. But I guess for me, the concern that I have is the potential impact because, it's not just education. It's not just your portfolio, but it's portfolios all across DLS that are recommending some of this shifting cost to our local governing bodies. Is there any way that we can add up all these recommendations along with additional costs that they're going to have just because of formula-driven issues like disparity grant and all this? It's probably a question for Hiram, I guess, probably more so than you. Maybe you can move that over to those guys. If we can just come up with an aggregated or a list of all of the additional costs that our counties are going to have, including this recommendation. And then also just to see what the proportional impact's going to be as a percentage of their total operating budget as well, because I think some counties, especially the smaller ones, as a percentage of their total operating budget, are going to see much higher impact than some of the larger counties are with these recommendations too. So if we can hopefully potentially get that information, that would be great. Thank you.
Absolutely, we can get that back to you.
Thank you for that very timely question, Delegate Grice. Are there any other questions for our analyst today? Thank you so much, Ms. Hyde, for your contributions. We'll now move on to the panel. Nice to see you, Superintendent Wright and team. You can't stay away from us.
All right, good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm Carrie Wright, the State Superintendent of Schools. With me today is Christian Tallur, the Deputy State Superintendent of Operations and Finance, Ms. Donna Gunning, who is the Assistant Superintendent of the Office of Finance, and Alex Reese, who is the Chief of Staff. I want to take a moment to also thank you and once again thank our analyst who always does a wonderful job and is such a good partner with us. So thank you, Laura, for all of your work. We appreciate that so much. As we begin, I'd like to share an update on how the department under my leadership is improving education for all children in the state, and then I will respond to the programmatic issues in the analysis. Since we met this time last year, the department, with the guidance from the State Board of Education and in collaboration with the Accountability and Implementation Board, has been extremely busy implementing policies designed to ensure all students are able to graduate high school, college, and career ready. As I shared with you last year, the Maryland State Board of Education adopted a resolution to have Maryland among the top 10 in the nation in reading and math on the nation's report card, commonly referred to as NAEP, by 2027. In 2013, Maryland was among the top 2 highest performing states, but by 2022, Maryland was ranked 40th in the nation. We have made significant investments in the science of reading and math through strategic philanthropic partnerships. Last spring, I finalized a partnership with the IBIS Group and the AIM Institute, the IBIS Group, to provide the micro-credentialing through SUNY, the state of New York, and through the AIM Institute. This is a program that is aligned to the science of reading and provides high-quality professional learning. Over 5,000 teachers and administrators have participated to date. Last spring, I also finalized a partnership with Arnold Ventures to bring math tutoring to middle schoolers and to provide professional development for teachers. The investments, along with the hard work of teachers across the state, are starting to show results. The 2024 NAEP scores resulted for 4th and 8th grade math show real progress in reading and modest progress in math. 4th grade reading scores are now 20th in the nation, up from 40th in 2022. However, I do need to note that our students who are in low-income families are ranked 43rd. So we have much more work to do for all of our students. Under Managing for Results, the analysis noted that, quote, more students score proficient or distinguished in ELA compared to mathematics. MSDE was asked to comment on the task force recommendations, including current issues with the MCAP, or our statewide assessments, timeline and costs associated with design, development, and implementation of a new statewide assessment, and reasons for changing assessments after only a limited time under the current assessment. Since the MCAP assessments were first introduced, there have been growing concerns and questions around the technical soundness of these assessments and their alignment to the state accountability system. In February of '24, MSDE announced the formation of a task force to examine the state's assessment and accountability system and strengthen the connection between school ratings and student achievement. Facilitated by the National Center for the Improvement of Educational Assessment, or more commonly known as the Center for Assessment, the task force discussed key aspects of assessment design and implementation and offered several recommendations for improvement to the current state assessment program. Broadly, recommendations included guaranteeing accessibility and fairness to a broad range of learners, securing a universally designed suite of assessments for consistency across grades and content areas, and ensuring that the total test length is no longer than necessary to provide valid, reliable, and useful scores. The members of this task force included state and local K-12 and higher education leaders, teachers, and PTA members. The task force presented their final report with recommendations and implementation guidelines to the state board, which the report was accepted on December 3rd, 2024. Some of those recommendations included adopting an appropriate growth measure, establishing common performance levels, overhauling the assessment system, and educating the community on how to understand assessment and student progress. MSDE was assisted in drafting the new assessments RFP by its Technical Advisory Committee, which provided objective and expert evaluation about assessment vendors on psychometric and other technical considerations. This guidance will help create a common assessment system that can provide more reliable results to inform valid instructional and accountability decisions. It is anticipated that a contract award recommendation will go to the Board of Public Works for approval in summer of 2025, and to generally expect the new assessment to be less costly. On October 22nd, 2024, the State Board adopted a comprehensive pre-K through grade 3 literacy policy after a rigorous review and over 8,000 pieces of stakeholder feedback. A new mathematics policy with a goal to increase math proficiency is being developed and reviewed. I personally believe that all kids are math kids, and the new policy will give all children the ability to demonstrate their skills in math. The stakeholder engagement, public comments, and the LEA engagement is ongoing and will conclude this spring. I also would like to talk about our teacher shortage in the state of Maryland and Grow Your Own. Maryland, like the rest of the nation, faces a teacher shortage. We estimate that to fully realize the potential of the blueprint, the state needs between 12 and 15,000 teachers. Today, there are over 6,000 conditionally certified teachers in the state. MSDE, in conjunction with the AIB, has been working on leadership training, recruitment and retention, and increasing the teacher pipeline is also critical for our state. Grow Your Own programs are focused on recruiting and preparing community-based candidates to teach in their local schools. These programs increase retention and promote strong connections between teachers and the students and families they serve. The Grow Your Own Educators Program, established in chapters 227 and 228 of 2024, has not been funded. The legislation provided the governor the flexibility in including this program in his budget. This new program will provide the design flexibility needed to work with our local communities and an on-the-job training and opportunities in an earn-to-learn program. Maryland must invest in teacher recruitment initiatives and flexibility in flexible GYO teacher preparation programs to ensure that Maryland students have access to diverse and highly qualified teachers. I'd like to talk a little bit about the training that is currently being provided through the Blueprint funding. Between January 16th and 19th, we brought together almost 900 school-based leaders in 5 different parts of the state as part of the Blueprint Training for Leaders program. This work will continue over the next few months. I would like to emphasize that the proposed Maryland Leadership Academy is a completely different program from the Blueprint Training for Leaders program in the Blueprint. The Training for Leaders program is geared towards system-level leaders such as school superintendents, local board members, and chief academic officers. Since we know effective school leadership drives teacher retention and student outcomes, the Maryland Leadership Academy focuses on providing training and mentoring for our existing and future leaders across the state, especially in the neediest schools, with a focus on instructional leadership, professional learning, and teacher retention. Each participant would receive a mentor who is an experienced leader to provide guidance and mentorship throughout the academy. I'd also like just to take a moment to talk about what we're doing to focus on our current teachers. The job of a teacher has never been more challenging than it is today. One-time teacher workshops typically fail to achieve their goals, and instead, we have seen that strong, non-evaluative instructional coaching makes the biggest impact on a teacher's practice. When teachers have access to an effective coach, they are engaged in a process that is not top-down, but rather one that values their expertise and guides them in integrating best practices. This process has lasting effects on their current students and, quite frankly, every group of students they teach in the future. Because when teachers feel supported and developed by a coach, they stay in the profession. We are hoping to establish the Academic Excellence Program, which would identify a cadre of state instructional coaches who remain employees of their local school systems and spend their time coaching teachers in schools. State instructional coaches engage in training alongside the existing LEA coaches, and they are empowered to work together and share resources. When I implemented this kind of state coaching program before, national experts called it a bold and critical move, and it was. Instructional coaching varies widely across districts, despite clear research on what makes coaching effective. This initiative allows us to set a statewide standard for excellence in teacher support. The ways we develop our teachers matter, and instructional coaching is the key. MSDE was also asked to comment on the reasons for the expanded CCR standard and what steps the department and the LEAs are taking to ensure that all Maryland students are college and career ready by the end of grade 12. As required in the Blueprint for Maryland's Future, the State Board of Education conducted an empirical study of the CCR standard. The study recommended that Maryland revise its CCR standard to assess CCR more accurately and equitably and to provide multiple measures for students to demonstrate college and career readiness, including a GPA measure. MSDE supports LEAs and students in a number of different avenues, including CCR supports. We actually developed a guide for that for LEAs, menus for best practices to inform how LEAs create plans to address each student's academic needs, and additionally, MSDE facilitates professional learnings for educators to align interventions with 6-year graduation plans and support LEAs to effectively implement multi-tiered systems of support. Before I end, I want to reiterate, if we want to see both short-term and long-term student gains, the Academic Excellence Program needs to be funded. I hope this helps you see how committed we all are to ensure our students can be successful. Now I'm going to turn this over to Krishna Tulur and Donna Gunning to share the department's fiscal analysis.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I wanted to take a moment again to thank you for your hard work and commitment to education, and to thank Ms. Laura Hyatt again for her thorough analysis and coordination with MSDE. Detailed responses have been submitted to the committee. As a follow-up to the testimony provided by Dr. Wright, Department concurs with DLS recommendation to adopt committee narrative requesting a report on MCAP scores and LEA progress on a remediation of COVID-19 related learning loss. Dr. Wright also provided detailed information regarding Grow Your Own, Leadership Academy, and Academic Excellence programs. MSDE respectfully disagrees with the DLS recommendation to reduce the proposed funding for these programs. Similarly, MSDE also respectfully disagrees with the proposed cut to the seats budget and concurs with governor's allowance. MSDE was asked to comment on the projected administrative costs and number of personnel needed for the MSDE headquarters budget for the administration of new blueprint programs proposed in SB 429, House Bill 504. The administrative costs included in these legislations for MSDE for the community school program will support robust learning opportunities, on-the-ground implementation support, technical assistance, bringing in national experts to provide tiered support in implementing best practices, support a multi-year evaluation of the program. Finally, the funds provide 2 additional staffing for the MSDE's current 2-position staff working with community schools. The additional positions will manage the work of the evaluation and technical assistance partners and will enable the department to provide differentiated support across LEAs. Next, MSDE was asked to comment on why the non-public placement program overspending in the fiscal year 2024 was not reported to the comptroller as required. Due to the continued uncertainty in funding, DLS recommends that MSDE continue to submit a closeout report for the program. The non-public placement program is a current year funded program that is fully reconciled by the fall. As such, the actual expenditures for the program in a given fiscal year are not known by a year-end close. In fiscal 2024, the department obligated the entire $145.6 million NPP appropriation, which did not require any reporting to the comptroller. It is important to note that any reconciling expenditures are recorded in the current fiscal year, but paid against the prior year appropriation. As a result, looking only at a fiscal year expenditure likely includes expenditures from the prior fiscal year. Department's written responses include details of the projected costs for the autism waiver program. Department would like to share that we will be able to serve 1,914 slots consistently in fiscal year 2026. As the participants vacate the program, the slots will be filled from the waiting list. MSDE is happy to provide an update on the program as recommended by DLS. DLS analysis asked Department to respond to 3 items regarding free and reduced price meal programs. First, the Department was unable to repurpose the available appropriation to provide additional compensatory education funding for Dorchester County. Regarding the Baltimore City CEP numbers, Through the Enough Act of 2024, the Governor's Office of Children is required to submit a report on the neighborhood indicators of poverty that includes different methods used to calculate indicators of poverty by October 1, 2025. The AIB is required to submit a methodological recommendation by December 1, 2025. Based on these ongoing work, and since Baltimore City serves some of the neediest students in the state, department made the decision to accept system-level poverty data. Department's audit team has included the Blueprint programs into its standard major state aid audit program. As a result of these additional programs, the team is not able to visit 6 LEAs in a year. The teams will visit LEA once every 3 years. All 3-year enrollment and program activities are included in the tri-annual audit. Department's written response provided detailed explanation for the variability of NBC teachers across the state. Department concurs with the DLS recommendation that MSDE submit a report on FRPM, CCR, and NBC teacher enrollment and counts addressing the concerns outlined in the analysis. MSDE also concurs with the DLS recommendation to provide updated information on ESSER funding through end of calendar year 2024, including breakout by expenditure types. Due to the remaining balance of Relief Act expenditures, DLS recommends committee narrative for LEA final reports on program funding, and MSDE respects the legislature's request. Finally, MSDE respectfully disagrees with the recommendation to amend the provision to shift 100% of the fiscal 2026 increase in the state share of teacher retirement system cost to local jurisdiction rather than 50%. The department concurs with the governor's allowance. With that, we stand ready for your questions.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Thank you for your team. I know there's just so many moving parts, so we just thank you for your participation and your cooperation with Ms. Hyde. Are there any questions? Vice Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all for being here. Just have a quick question. I know we talk a lot about teacher shortage, and you mentioned how we have, from a state point of view, about 12 to 15,000 teacher shortage within the state. Have we ever looked at and compared that to how many people we have in college that is actually taking these majors? Does that align with the folks that's in college right now? Like, what is those numbers looking like? Are we able even to fill those positions based on the folks that are taking those majors right now in college?
We do know that the numbers have been declining in overall ed prep programs. We, are an import state, if you will. Most of our teachers come from out of state into Maryland. This is not uncommon, I think, for states that are across the nation that are experiencing difficulty with getting enough teachers. We simply don't, our ed prep programs are simply not able to produce the number of teachers that we need, and I think those percentages have varied over the years, but we have not, even in some that have seen a slight uptick, even upon graduation, not all of them have become licensed. So there's just a number of factors that go into that, to be honest with you. The 12 to 15,000 is over the lifetime of the blueprint to fully implement the blueprint. Our concern also is with the over 6,000 conditionally certified teachers we have. That has just skyrocketed over the past 5 years. I think when the blueprint was first launched, I want to say we had somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe 500 or 600 conditionally certified teachers, and now we are well over 6,000 conditionally certified teachers. And we are running at about 1,600 to 1,800 vacancies. So it's a real piece that we're trying to look at.
Absolutely. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Delegate Beecham.
I was just wondering that the National Board certification for teachers, how many steps are there in that?
4 steps. It usually takes, I'm going to say, 3 years is what I want to say, 2 to 3 years, depending on the person. And our concern there, even though we've been producing a fair amount of National Board Certified teachers, our concern has been, even with the incentive that the General Assembly put forward in trying to encourage National Board Certified teachers to move into some of our lowest performing schools. We only have about 12% right now that are in our lowest performing schools. And more importantly, in trying to create a diverse group of teachers. Right now, we're sitting at about 19% out of all of our NBCs. So it's kind of like the good news, bad news, if you will. Like the good news is the numbers are increasing, but the bad news is we're, even with the incentive, they're not going to our lowest performing schools, and our teachers of color are not where we need them to be.
And the next question is, what is the pay increase per scale?
Per scale,
Yeah,
or
in other
to
words,
go
or steps.
to?
If you have 4 steps, for each step, our superintendent, Micah Stauffer from Wycomico County, he was concerned about us being able to fund the, for each step. He said, you don't really know how many teachers are going to actually get, the certification. So he asked me to ask, as far as the funding goes, per step, what's I know the first one is around 10,000 is what he was saying.
Right, so.
The stipend versus the step. That's what I was trying to get at.
So the stipend is
Yeah.
$10,000 for achieving national board and an additional $7,000 for teaching in a low-performing school. And then there are other steps in the career ladder that are negotiated by each LEA, and the increments that the LEAs are providing to teachers are provided to the department. And this year is the first year that there's some renewal of NBC certification, and those teachers get on average $4,000 to $5,000 additional dollars.
So we can, the one thing that within each LEA is they're negotiating, the amount of each step is going to be different from LEA to LEA, but the consistency is the stipend that's awarded once you receive your NBC of 10,000, and then if you go to a low performing school of 7,000, but the steps could vary depending on what LEA you're in as to how much each step is worth.
Okay, but
If that
that's,
makes sense.
so the stipend, is that per year? Once they get that, then that's an additional 10,000 on their salary? And each step, like say the second step, could be an extra 7,000. So in essence, if you had all 4 steps, you could increase your salary by what?
You could look at that if you're.
30,000 a year?
I think what would be helpful is to sit down with your superintendent with a negotiated agreement, because that is all in print for everybody to see. And you could literally go, take a school and take a look at the teachers in that school with where they currently are, how many are NBC, how many are going to continue with that, and what their steps would be. And you could calculate that on an individual basis.
Yeah, I guess the question that I was actually working around to was, do you anticipate a percentage of these teachers over a course of time, in order to kind of get an average of how much, additional funding we're going to need for Blueprint at some point? Because, if you're at 19% with the teachers right now, if that jumps to 50%, then, the Blueprint, the cost of that's going to.
Yeah, and I think that's why you go back to the negotiating table, each time when you're talking about that, because you're trying to stay obviously within a budget. But we can provide you the data annually to let you know how many more NBC teachers that we have, or how many are continuing to receive that stipend. That's something we could provide you on an annual basis.
Okay.
Just not the individual steps within.
Yes.
Just
No,
yet.
I understand that.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
You were just showing off today, Delegate. Showing off.
Good
Just
questions,
picking-
good
yeah,
questions.
Very good questions. Any other questions for the superintendent? Seeing none, thank you for your time today. Thank you to your
thank you.
team. And I know we do have some witness testimony. I think Rhea Gupta with Strong Schools Maryland is here.
Sorry, guys. Good afternoon, Chair Smith, Vice Chair Harris, and members of the Education and Economic Development Subcommittee. My name is Rhea Gupta. I'm the Interim Executive Director of Strong Schools Maryland and the co-chair of the Blueprint Coalition. I know you've heard a lot of numbers over the last day, so I wanted to provide some critical context specifically regarding Issue 1, proposed changes to Blueprint spending in SB 429, HB 504. First, on collaborative time, it's part of the per pupil foundation amount set to phase in next next year, starting at $163 per student, gradually increasing over 8 years, reaching $1,527 by 2033. The proposed 4-year pause means the focus has been on cuts over the next 4 years, but the impact extends far beyond that. You won't just lose 4 years, we'll be playing catch up until 2037. A kindergartner starting next year will receive $6,448 less in promised funding by the time they graduate. Just let that sink in. Multiply that by nearly 890,000 students, and it's clear that this isn't just a pause, it's a systemic defunding of public education over the next 14 years. Second, the numbers you've heard largely focus on the state share, but that's only part of the picture. State and local funding are linked, so cutting per pupil funding lowers the minimum required local contribution in some counties, further reducing resources for students. Changing the blueprint formula doesn't just shift state dollars, it creates ripple effects across school funding at every level. Finally, we're making long-term cuts to education at a time when we don't even know if current funding is truly adequate to meet student needs, let alone build the world-class schools we envisioned. This is not the time to gamble with the future of Maryland students, as many of you know. Thank you for the opportunity to provide this information. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gupta, for your testimony. Any questions for her? Seeing none, thank you so much.
Thank
you. We do have several other written testimony provided, but that concludes, I believe, all oral testimony. Oh, yeah, please.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to give a quick shout out. I do have a shadow today. Mr. Jing Xing is here from the Maryland Student Legislative Seniors, Johns Hopkins University. He is majoring in applied mathematics and statistics, international studies, and economics. So we appreciate him being here today. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Of course, welcome. And that, again, concludes the budget hearing, for today. We'll transition to our voting session momentarily. Okay, now we're transitioning to our EED voting session. We do have 3 bills that we'll be voting on today, and we'll begin with House Bill 298. Delegate Kerr.
House Bill 298, this is the Maryland Higher Education Commission Demographic Data Collection, Parental Status. The bill requires MHEC to collect data from each public institution of higher education in the state on the parental status of students enrolled at each institution. The bill requires each public institution to develop questions about demographics of the parents of the student. And then there's a reporting requirement that'll begin September 1st, 2026, and every September after that.
Any discussion about House Bill 298? Delegate Grice.
So this is semi-aggregated, right? It's, okay. So is it, So when it's being reported, are they going to be able to know like who the student's name is? Are they going to know like the child's name and your age and everything like that?
That's a very good question. No, this is about getting a sense of how many students that have those parenting needs are on a campus so that they can better support them through programming, not individual like intervention. It's like the longitudinal data center, how that's all, you know.
Right, yeah, and I generally don't vote for a lot of that data collection mainly because of that reason. And so I'm not sure exactly where to go on this one, how in-depth it's going to be. I just believe that a lot of data should be kept private.
Do you remember the testimony? Do you want any, Delegate Forbes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was going to share that I found the testimony very compelling from students who were in school as parents when they said, if you don't know how many of us are, how do you know how to support us? And I found that very compelling. Like how many people are struggling with balancing work, parenting, and going to school? And do we support them enough in their endeavors? Because they're all trying to build a better life for their family.
Do we know how many student parents that are out there who, I guess, need these potential services that aren't getting them because they don't know where to
Honestly,
ask for it?
It's the purpose of the bill. We
I know,
really don't know.
Yeah. I know.
We honestly don't know. And just a reminder, because Delegate Kerr is a retired community college professor, those are also our student segments that tend to be more likely to have other familial, responsibilities and work responsibilities.
Thank you, ma'am. Yeah, well, so really, this isn't about like knowing the personal data of people. So no name is attached to it. It's basically just for collection of the information. Yeah, that makes sense.
Do we have a motion to vote? Is there a second? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. The ayes have it. That concludes the vote on HB 298. Moving on to HB 473. There is a sponsor problem, but I do ask you all to move beyond.
So HB 473 is the Maryland Community College Promise Scholarship Program. The bill allows part-time associate degree students to receive the Promise Scholarship Awards for up to 6 years while maintaining the current scenario for the full-time associate degree students. So this is about allowing part-time associate degree students to participate.
Delegate Grace.
But I do have a question, though. So did the community colleges weigh in on this? I don't recall.
Yeah, they did. It was favorable on this here, and they actually testified with me on the
Because I know a lot of their students are part-time, and the whole idea is to be able to get them trained and into the workforce. And
Correct.
And it's not fair, I guess, if you go to school full-time and you can get a scholarship, and you're penalized if you're just going part-time. So I think it's a good idea.
Absolutely.
Any other questions concerning this bill? Do we have a motion to vote?
In favor.
Is there a second? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. That concludes the vote session on House Bill 473. And last but not least, House Bill 961.
So House Bill 961 is the Commissioned Public Arts Artist Rights Bill. The bill would, as introduced, prohibits an entity from including provisions in a contract for sale of public art that would require an artist to waive copyright protections or other rights under federal law relating to copyright protections that are under federal law. The sponsor had two amendments. First amendment's technical, changes title and purpose paragraph. The second amendment authorizes an artist to waive their copyright protections if the artist chooses to enter into the contract and wants to waive them. And then the second amendment requires the entity that commissions the public art to register the art with the Maryland State Arts Council.
Any questions about the amendments as presented? Okay, first we need to take a motion on amending the bill as proposed here. A second? That has been moved and seconded. All those in favor of adopting the amendment, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Is there a second? All those in favor of moving the bill as amended, say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Thank you very much. That concludes the voting session for today. Thank you.